Crispy Cats, and happy Friday to you all. We are picking up where we left off yesterday on The Wind in the Willows, and this is Mr. Badger. All right, get all tucked in. Here we go. They waited patiently for what seemed a very long time, stamping in the snow to keep their feet warm. At last they heard the sound of shuffling footsteps approaching the door from the inside. It seemed, as Mole remarked to the rat, like no one walking in the carpet slippers that were too large for him down the hall, which was intelligent of Mole, because that was exactly what it was. There was a noise of a bolt shot back, and the door opened a few inches, enough to show a long snout and a pair of sleepy, blinky eyes. "Now, the very next time this happens," said a gruff, suspicious voice, "I shall be exceedingly angry. Who is this time disturbing people at such a night? Speak up." "Oh, Badger," cried Rat, "let us in, please. It's me, Rat, and my friend Mole. We've lost our way in the snow." "What, Ratty?" "My dear little man," explained the Badger, quite, quite a different voice. "Come along in, both of you at once." "Why, you must be perished. I never. Lost in the snow, in the wild wood, too, at this time of the night, but come in with you." The two animals tumbled over each other in the eagerness to get inside, and heard the door shut behind them with a great joy of relief. The Badger, who wore a long dressing gown and whose slippers were indeed very down at heel, carried a flat candlestick in his paw, and had probably been on his way to bed when the summons sounded. He took kindly down on them and patted both their heads. "This is not the sort of night for small animals to be out," he said paternally. "I'm afraid both of you up to some pranks again, Ratty. But come along, come into the kitchen. There's a first-rate fire there, and supper and everything." He shuffled on in front of them, carrying the light, and they followed him, nudging each other, anticipating sort of way down along the gloomy and, to tell the truth, decidedly shabby passage into the short central hall, of which they could dimly see long tunnel passages, branching passages, mattress and without apparent end, but where the doors in the halls, well, stout oaken, comfortable looking doors. I'm sorry, I just checked out the Soupy. What a book is this? This is actually called The Wind in the Willows, and it is bedtime, Mr. Soupy. All right. The floor was well-worn red brick, and on the wide hearth burnt a fire of logs. Thanks, Classy Beats. Well, out of any suspicion of draught, a couple of high-backed settles facing each other on the side of the fire gave further sitting accommodations for a sociably disposed. In the middle of the room stood a long table of plain boards, placed on trestles with benches down each side. At one end, where an armchair pushed back, where the spread remains of the badger's plain but ample support, rows of spotless plates winked from the shelves of the dresser at the far end of the room. The rafters, overhung hams, bundled of dried herbs, nets of onions, and baskets of eggs. It seemed a place where heroes could filthy feast after victory, where weary harvesters could line up and scores along the table and keep their harvest home with mirth song, or two or three friends of simple taste could sit about and pleased and eat and smoke and talk in comfort and content. The ruddy brick floor smiled up. Hi, everybody. The ruddy brick floor smiled up at the smoky ceiling and often settled, shiny with long wear exchanged cheer glances with each other. Plates on the dresser grind at pots on the shelf, and the merry firefly flickered and played over everything with distinction. The kindly badger thrust them down on a settle to toast themselves at the fire, and the blade them removed them their wet coats and boots. Then he fetched them dressing gowns and slippers, and himself bathed the mole's shin with warm water and mended the cut with sticky plaster, till the whole thing was just as good as new, if not better. It's embracing light and warmth, warm and dry at last, with weary legs propped up in front of them, and suggestive clink of plates being arranged on the table behind. It seemed to the storm-driven animals, now in a safe anchorage, that the cold and trackless wild Willows just left outside was miles and miles away, and all that they had suffered in it had a half-forgotten dream. When at last they were thoroughly toasted, the badger summoned them to the table where they had been busily laying and repast. They had felt pretty hungry before, but when they actually saw it last the supper was spread before them, it really seemed only a dream. Here's a beautiful little illustration. All right. If anybody here is, I hope that everybody's getting along here in the chat. Ask me a question, Walk Prods. What's up? Aw, you guys are so kind. Love you all. Okay, well let's keep reading, and I'll keep glancing down to see on the chat. Okay. Question of what they should attack first, where all was so attractive, and whether the things would obligedly wait for them until they had time to give them attention. Conversation. CrispySkates, will you marry? She's beautiful. Will you marry me? Aw, that is the kindest thing anybody has ever asked me in a chat, I must say. All right, guys, let's keep reading. The badger did not, you made my day, you guys. I love y'all. The badger did not mind that sort of thing at all, nor did he take any notice of elbows on the table or everybody speaking at once. As he did not know into society, he got an idea these things belonged to things that he didn't really matter. We know, of course, that he was wrong and took narrow a few because they do matter very much, though it would take too long to explain. He sat in his armchair and the head of the table and nodded gravely at intervals as the animals told their story, and he did not seem surprised or shocked at anything, and he never said, "I told you so," or "just what I always said," or remarked that they ought to have done so or ought not to have done something else. The mole began to feel very friendly towards him. When supper was really finished at last, each animal felt that his skin was now as tight as decently saved, that by this time they didn't care a hang for anybody or anything. They gathered round the growling embers of the great wood fire and thought how jolly it was to be sitting up so late and so independent and so full of after they had chatted for a time about things in general. The badger said heartily, "Now then, tell us the news from part of the world. How's old Toad going on?" "Oh, from the bad to the worse," said the rat gravely, while the mole crocked up as on a saddle and basking the firefly, his heels higher than his head, tried to look properly mournful. "Another smash up only last week, and one a bad one. You see, he will insist on driving himself hopelessly and capably." That sounds like my grandmother. Oh, well, let me see. Let me go back to this chat. Let's see. Gang, I'm about to cry, bro. This was one of the gang I fumbled. I might be. Uh-oh. What did I do? Okay, what's your question? What's your question, Walkman Pods? Bueller? Bueller? All right. Okay, everybody. I'm going to read the comments. I'll get back into the live comments later. I got to get this kitten to bed. I hope you guys have a wonderful, lovely Friday. Until tomorrow evening, keep it crispy.